Hello, and welcome to today's Infill People webinar, Reducing Workplace Stress with Mindfulness, presented by Katie Scherer. Katie is the owner of Connected Communities and the founder of Stories, Songs, and Stretches, a program that trains participants to use yoga-inspired movement to support early learning. She's a registered yoga teacher who specializes in the instruction of yoga and mindfulness to children. She's also co-founder of the Bee Project, a trauma-informed mindfulness curriculum for pre-K through 12th grade students and teachers. Katie has published 2 books with the American Library Association. Her most recent title is Stories, Songs, and Stretches, Creating Playful Story Times with Yoga and Movement. I am now happy to turn the webinar over to Katie Scherer.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate very much having the opportunity to spend some time with you all this afternoon. So thanks for being here and joining us. I hope that when the webinar is over today, you will have a little bit more space, a little bit more energy to take back to your work. So I'd like to start off with a poll that'll help to give me a sense of what your experience with mindfulness is prior to now. So we can go ahead and open that up. This poll is just going to ask you to share what your experience with mindfulness is, whether that is you've never practiced mindfulness before or you have a very formal practice every day. So we'll keep that open for a few minutes so everyone has a chance to kind of pick where they fall on that spectrum. And the folks who are helping us out will share when the poll is ready. So I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing that.
I can read it out for you if you like, Katie.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Great. So I have never practiced mindfulness. We got 41%. I have practiced mindfulness in the past, but not regularly, 24%. And then I occasionally practice mindfulness, 23%. And then I practice mindfulness regularly and I practice mindfulness every day. We have 6% for both of those.
Okay, great. So lots of folks who are new to the practice, excellent. That's really my favorite because I don't have to encourage you to come with beginner's mind. You're already coming with beginner's mind because you're a beginner. So that's fantastic. I'm so glad that you're here. So let's all take a minute to actually experience for ourselves what one way of practicing mindfulness feels like. So wherever you are, just allow yourself to sit in some way that's comfortable for you. It doesn't have to be anything formal at this point. And we're going to do a sound practice. So in a few moments, you'll hear the sound of a bell. And I'd like for you to just allow your attention to rest on the sound and allow your attention to follow that sound of the chime until you can hear it no more. Okay. So if you've decided to close your eyes, go ahead and open them back up. I'd like to know one more thing about you all before I start going any further with talking about mindfulness, just to get a sense of what you feel your current level of work-related stress is. So would you gauge your work-related stress to be low, average, or high? And you don't have to think about this too much or feel like you have to justify it in any way. Just whatever feels like your immediate reaction is fine. Okay. So most people falling somewhere in that medium to high, and just a few in the low of workplace stress. That doesn't totally shock me. It always makes me laugh when people have an idea of the library being this quiet job where you're reading books all day and blah blah blah. We know better, right? We definitely know better. There's all kinds of different stressors that we might be encountering throughout our day. And I'm sure if you scan through this list of things from challenging customers to having to do more with less, to the morale of the staff and the just the pace of change and the skill set that we have to feel like we're able to keep up. I'm sure that everyone can find something on this list that they can identify with. So, what is mindfulness and how can it help? How is it connected to workplace stress? So, I love this definition from John Kabat-Zinn, and that's a name that some folks may be familiar with. John Kabat-Zinn is um, one of the folks most responsible for really bringing mindfulness to the West, and he has been doing this work for over 30 years. He is the founder of the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program, which is part of the University of Massachusetts Medical School. So doing a lot of very rigorous scientific research in the field of mindfulness and teaching about mindfulness for quite a long time. And he defines mindfulness as the act of paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And those three descriptors are really key. On purpose, as in it's intentional. You know, mindfulness isn't something that just happens to us. It's something that we practice intentionally. It's in the present moment. So we're not following around memories from the past. We're not getting pulled off into plans for the future. We're in the moment that is, and we're there without judgment. And that is a really tough part of the process for many people. So whatever comes up, we just allow to be there with this sort of friendly curiosity. And when we do that, we're practicing mindfulness. So let's take a couple more minutes to actually experience what it feels like to be together mindfully in a more intentional way. So however you're sitting, just notice your posture, and if your legs are crossed, uncross the legs, allow both feet to be resting on the floor. If your spine is sort of, or your back is sort of hunched or slouched in the chair, just scoot forward a little bit so your spine can come from up from the back of the chair. Allow your shoulders to rest down away from the ears. And when you're ready, if it feels comfortable to you, just allow your eyes to softly close. If you prefer to practice with your eyes open, that's absolutely fine. And all we're going to do right now is just notice the breath. So allow your full attention to just be with your body breathing right now, the physical sensation of breathing in and breathing out. There's no need to change your breath in any way. Just notice what you feel and where you feel it. You may notice that thoughts and feelings arise. That's totally fine. It's what brains do. So when those thoughts and feelings arise, just notice them. Ah, I'm thinking. And then very gently escort your full attention back to the breath. So if you find that you're having to do that over and over and over again, you're doing it just right. We're not trying to clear the mind. We're just continually bringing our attention on purpose back to the breath. When you're ready, if your eyes are closed, you can softly blink them open. Just take a minute to notice what you feel, anything shift. And we'll keep going, getting to know our brains together a little bit. So if you are at all like me, this picture of a brain may resonate with you. I really love this picture because this brain is just full of stuff, right? There's so many different things going on. And that's really how our minds are, right? We've got all of these thoughts, all of these feelings, all of these plans, our fears, our dreams, our histories, all of it just in there, and it creating the lens through which we move through the world every day. And anything that happens can bump up against one of those things, one of those thoughts, one of those beliefs, one of those feelings, and then, put in motion this whole chain of events. I don't know if you have ever had the experience of finding yourself lost in a conversation, just an imaginary conversation with a person that you would have if you could, give them a piece of your mind or the thing you wish you had said or anything like that. That's just, one small example. But this is really what our minds can feel like a lot of the time. So I am by no means a neuroscientist. I'm not even I wouldn't consider myself to be an expert even on mindfulness. I've been practicing for about 10 years, but I'm a practitioner. I'm somebody who does this work too. And I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where I'm able to share this work with others because it's been really profound in my life. But I'm not a neuroscientist, and I'm going to give us a basic introduction to the brain based on a kind of a way of explaining the brain that I often use with kids that's called the hand model of the brain. And I don't know who developed that originally, but there's lots of different scripts for it that you can find pretty easily. So this is one that I often use with kids, but it's always really helpful for adults too. So if we think about, we know that our brain has lots and lots of different parts, but we're going to think about two parts in particular right now. So if you look at the palm of your hand, just have your hand open in front of you, outstretched. You can imagine that in the palm of your hand is the animal brain. And then if you close your hands into a soft fist, that outside piece is the thinking center of the brain. And we'll start with talking about the animal part of the brain. This is the oldest, least evolved part of the brain. It consists of the limbic system, which has the amygdala as part of it. And the animal brain knows how to survive. That is its main job, is to keep us alive and keep the species going. So anytime that we are in danger or feel threatened, the animal brain is really going to take over, and it's going to do its job, which is to keep us safe. But the animal brain only knows how to do that in one of three ways. It's going to release chemicals and messages and put in motion this chain of events that's going to tell us to either fight, flee, or freeze. So that is what the animal brain really knows how to do. Now the thinking center, so if we close our hand back into the small fist again, this is with kids I'll say thinking center, but this is the cortex of the brain. So this is the newer part of the brain that is actually able to, as the name would suggest, think, consider consequences, make decisions, all of that kind of stuff. But here's the deal. When our animal brain is triggered, when it thinks that it needs to kick into action and keep us safe, we can't access the thinking center of our brain. So we're left with a brain that might look something like this. A little bit freaked out, maybe. So all perception is going to go through the limbic system first. All right, so everything that we see and feel and hear and smell, it's all being registered first by the limbic system before we have any conscious thought about it at all. So the limbic system is processing, whether or not this is a threat, and then putting together, a chain of events based on that information. And it's sloppy. The amygdala is sloppy, and that is on purpose. It makes these really loose associations because, again, its job is to keep us alive. Its job is to promote survival. So when our amygdala fires, telling us that it needs to keep us safe, even if we're in a situation because of these loose associations where it's not life or death, and we don't have to be responding in that way. That's not a mistake. It's instead a prompt for mindfulness. And if we think about it that way, it's almost like our body and our brain are telling us, okay, here's an opportunity. Here's an opportunity to be with this in a different way. Back in the day, we had to really be careful of predators. Okay, so we could get eaten by a bear or whatever. So our amygdala is on, super vigilant. It's on the lookout for bears and other things that might want to eat us. Okay. So anything that made it feel like that could happen was going to make the amygdala fire and tell us whether to fight, flee, or freeze. Now today, for most of us in our daily lives, being chased by bears isn't so much of a threat, but we are chased constantly by technology and by the little ding on our phone that lets us know there's another email we need to respond to, or there's another tweet or whatever. And that can wind up affecting us, causing us to have this stress response in a way that the amygdala knows how to have a stress response, which is at the level of being chased by a bear. Okay. So this isn't a mistake. The amygdala is sloppy to promote survival, but it is this prompt for mindfulness. And we can actually think of mindfulness as a hack that brings us into the present moment. And I like thinking of mindfulness as a hack for the brain, because what the research shows is that over time, as we practice mindfulness, it actually changes the physical structure and the physiology of our brain. So that to me is just amazing. And this is all in the field of neuroplasticity. So our brains can change over time based on our thoughts and our experiences, and we can change our brain with mindfulness. Okay. Is it best to do, this is a good spot maybe for a question before we go into another practice. So somebody asked, is it best to do a list after or before you are practicing mindfulness? And I'll say, I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on the chat box over here and addressing questions as they seem most suited. So if you have something, just feel free to send it in, and some things I may leave for the end. This one, I would say, you can play around with that. You may find that if you are, I'm assuming that this is like a to-do list. Somebody's asking, should I do my to-do list before or after practicing? If you find that you're constantly coming back to your planning mind as you're practicing, it might be helpful to you to do a list first and then see how that goes, if you can let the list go. Or it may help you to do that, to practice first and then make your list. You may have a little bit more clarity about what needs to be on it. I can't really give you there's no best practice on that. It's going to be individual. Okay. So another practice, coming back to the idea of mindfulness being a hack in some ways for our brains. This particular breathing practice is my absolute favorite for that, because when our amygdala is firing, remember the thinking center of the brain, we can't access it. So we can't just tell our brain, hey, calm down, depending on how stressful the situation is. But we can use our body to communicate to our brain the message of, hey, I'm actually safe. It's okay to relax now. And we can do that by breathing in a way that allows our exhale to be longer than our inhale. That activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also known as the relaxation response. So it works to counter the stress response in the body. So again, just allow yourself to find some way to sit that's comfortable for you. If you're sitting up in a chair and you've crossed your legs, just uncross your legs, allow both feet to rest on the floor. Allow your shoulders to come back and down and let your spine be tall. If you feel comfortable closing the eyes, then please close the eyes. And I'll count us through some inhales and exhales where the exhale is longer than the inhale. And we can just do this through both ways, through the inhale and exhale through the nose, if that feels comfortable. So we'll begin inhaling for a count of 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhaling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhaling 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhaling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhaling 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhaling 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go ahead and continue for a couple more breaths. You can use any count that works for you as long as the exhale is longer than the inhale. And if you want to drop the practice altogether, you feel free to do that as well. And just feel your breath. And when we're ready, we can blink open the eyes and come back together. And we'll talk a little bit about how mindfulness actually changes the brain. Some of you maybe have seen this meme before, mindful on the left versus mindful on the right. And mindful on the left is pretty much our default mode. This is autopilot, right? Where we've got all kinds of things just kind of bumping around in each other. And so, whether those things are positive or negative, that's where we are. We're considering the conversation that needs to be had or the email that we have to write or, whatever it is. Whereas when we're mindful, as in the person on the right, we're in the present moment. We're able to be with what is as it is. And this actually affects the physical structure of the brain. So our thoughts actually have an effect on the physical structure of the brain. To me, that is just mind-blowing. That is such exciting stuff because it's so empowering, right? We don't have to think of ourselves as, oh, I'm just a stressed out person. We can learn a different way, and our brains can absolutely, over time, adapt. And that is just really, really amazing. So our thoughts, they make these lenses, right? And so the lenses then, they kind of color how we experience the world. And when we're able to be mindful, be actually in the present moment as it is, we can see our experiences more clearly. We can relate with the world more directly as it is. So the scientific research on mindfulness, regular mindfulness practice, absolutely shows that mindfulness practice reduces stress. And it does this by reducing the size of the amygdala and increasing the cortex. So reducing that part of the limbic system that's so reactive and reduces the production of the stress hormone cortisol. It also helps the brain to build new neural pathways, which can help to increase empathy, and it increases that space between perception and reaction. And that's really what we're going for. That's really what we're looking for. So that instead of moving through the world on autopilot, where it's just stimulus response. Something happens, and then based on, whatever I've experienced in my life prior to this moment, I have a story that experience falls into, and it sets this reactive chain of events into motion. So that's kind of the default operating mode. And it allows for the continuation of old habits that maybe aren't necessarily helpful and all of those kinds of things. But when we can increase the space between perception and reaction, we have the opportunity to choose other ways to be. So someone cuts me off in my car and I am a regular mindfulness practice, I might be able to notice, oh, my heart is really racing. I am really feeling anger. I am really feeling fear right now. And then I can make some choices around what I'm going to do with that, rather than just, being reactive and maybe flying off the handle or bringing that work into my work, or that stress into my workplace, or whatever it is that I might do otherwise. So mindfulness doesn't change the world that we live in. I mean, it does in the fact that it changes how we relate to it, but it doesn't mean that it's not a magic wand. I have a yoga teacher friend, and she often says, yoga changes us and it keeps us exactly the same. And I think that is a perfect way to think about mindfulness too. It changes us and it keeps us exactly the same. So what I mean by that is that all of the stuff that happens in life is still going to happen, right? We're still going to have the challenging customer that comes in that we have to deal with. We're still going to have, unpredictable budget cuts. We're still going to have people cutting us off in traffic and, dings on our phone and all of those kinds of things. So we can't stop the waves, but as John Kabat-Zinn says, we can learn how to surf. And that is really what this practice is about being able to relate differently to all those things that happen. And, the research on this is really exciting because it shows that people who do have a regular mindfulness practice, things are able to move through their limbic system and into the cortex. Their perception is able to move through the limbic system and into the cortex more quickly. And when stressful things happen, they're able to recover much more quickly than other people. So it really does help to give us more space in which we can choose how we want to respond. And that is a big part of why I'm incorporating so many opportunities for practice in our limited time together today, because this is not an intellectual exercise. We can understand in an intellectual way what the benefits of mindfulness are, but we don't get the benefits of mindfulness just as a thinking exercise. It actually requires practice. So let's take the opportunity, since we have it, to do a bit more practice. This is a grounding practice that's used a lot of times for folks who have issues with anxiety. And it really helps the intention behind it is to use our sense awareness to bring us back into the present moment. So if we find that we're caught in a loop of thought or reaction, this can sometimes be helpful for bringing us out of that loop and into the present moment. So once again, just find a seat that's going to be comfortable for you. Key things here are mostly just to make sure that the spine can be nice and tall. So if you're kind of slumped and slouched, just reconnect with your spine and feel each vertebrae stacked on top of the other. We'll begin this practice actually with our eyes open. So begin by connecting with your sense of sight and noticing 5 things that you can see right now. No need to judge them or label them. Just notice 5 things you can see. And if it feels comfortable to close your eyes, please do so. You're certainly welcome to keep them open if that's better for you. And now notice 4 things that you can hear right now. No need to think too hard about them. Just notice with open awareness 4 things that you can hear right now. And letting that go, notice 3 things that you can feel right now. 3 physical sensations in this moment. Allow yourself to notice 2 things you can smell right now. You gently breathe in and out through your nose. And finally, notice 1 thing for which you feel gratitude right now. Feel that sense of gratitude in your body. And when you're ready, you can blink open the eyes. And we'll talk a little bit more about what libraries specifically are doing with mindfulness and how the practice of mindfulness connects to library work. So to introduce this idea, I have a quote, a little bit of a reading really from Thich Nhat Hanh that I wanted to share with you all. And he says, mindfulness helps us recognize what is going on in the present moment. When we breathe in mindfully, we are aware of our in-breath. This is mindfulness of breathing. When we enjoy drinking our tea and drink it with full awareness of the present moment, this is mindfulness of drinking. When we walk and become aware of every step we make, that is mindfulness of walking. Practicing mindfulness does not require that we go anywhere else. We can practice mindfulness in our room or on our way from one place to another. We can do the same things we always do, walking, sitting, working, eating, talking, except we do them with awareness of what we are doing. So I wanted to share that because I really love the way that this explains that mindfulness is something that we can access and cultivate, really cultivate anytime, no matter what it is that we're doing. So we typically start learning the practice by focusing on the breath in some way or another, because the breath is accessible for everyone. You don't have to spend any money to access your breath. You don't have to have any fancy cushion to access your breath, and you can do it anywhere. Nobody even has to know that you're doing that. So it's a really great way to start to begin to cultivate a practice. However, really, truly, anything that we do in our lives can be done mindfully by really making by intentionally allowing our full awareness to rest with what it is that we're doing as it is, exactly as it is. So we can be mindful with that customer who is the 20th person to ask us the same question today. We can be mindful with that and know that this is the first time that they've asked it, and feel in our own bodies any physical sensations that might accompany annoyance or irritation or whatever it is that we might be experiencing and answering the same question 20 times. And that's just kind of a silly example, but it's true that we can really do anything mindfully, and that absolutely connects with public library work, because ultimately we are here to serve our communities. And a tool that allows us to really be present with that, especially in a non-judgmental way, rather than getting pulled off by the various stressors that we might have to deal with in our work life, is going to allow us to really be there for them in a more responsive way. And that's really what the work is about. So there are some cool things happening with mindfulness in libraries. I loved looking into this to get ready for this presentation. So in public libraries, most of what I've been able to find are things that individual staff members are doing, or maybe there's a manager or somebody who is in a supervisory role that's introducing some mindfulness to the staff. in Luck Public Library, Wisconsin, there is a librarian there who's actually hosting meditation groups and classes for the public. I think she uses guided mindfulness practices for that, like recordings. Um, so definitely some neat things happening. And one of my favorite things that I found was this staff wellness retreat that the Massachusetts Library Association Youth Services section put on. Kudos to you all. I tell you what, I wish I got to go to this retreat. This is such a cool idea. So they have this wellness retreat, and you can see all these cool things um, that they included in that. And part of it was an opportunity to practice some mindfulness together. So interesting things happening that are facing externally for the customer, but mostly, well, most of what I was able to find is more facing internally on staff learning how to use these skills. Academic libraries have a lot more going on, actually, which I mostly come from public libraries, so I was a little bit surprised to find this. So, way to go, academic libraries! I don't think that I was giving you your credit, so I have more respect. Um, but some of the cool things that I found were academic libraries that are creating mindfulness areas for students. So places that college students can come that are designated quiet areas, and they can do those different mindfulness practices. Um, Academic libraries hosting programs and classes for students and for staff, practice groups that are open to students and staff, which I thought was a really interesting idea, the idea of students and staff practicing together. I think that's really cool. So this is one of the flyers that I found from a Belk library. They have a whole day of different kinds of meditation and yoga, which really is just mindful movement, just paying close attention to moving in a certain way. Um, so pretty neat things going on in academic libraries. And then I don't know of a whole lot that is happening in school libraries, although the movement to bring mindfulness into schools really is growing. The research on that is very interesting. Definitely, there's a lot of research that shows that children being exposed to mindfulness and developing mindfulness practices can help to reduce different kinds of behavior issues, can improve self-regulation, can improve focus and learning. And the kids who are showing the greatest benefits from learning mindfulness practices are actually the kids who are the most at risk and have the most need. So for those kids, the benefit is the greatest. It's kind of helping to to help with that a little bit. So one of the things in terms of school libraries that I did want to talk about briefly is I am working on something called the Bee Project here in Kentucky. And this is a mindfulness curriculum that myself and a team of colleagues have developed, being implemented district-wide in a county out here as part of their social emotional learning curriculum. So that means everyone from administration down to support staff is being trained in mindfulness and being supported in different ways as they work to cultivate their own mindfulness practices, allowing them to be more present with each other and with the students, and then also bringing mindfulness practices into the classroom. And one of the cool things that I heard that a school librarian who's part of this project is doing is she created a little like mindfulness area in the library, just a quiet spot that is for kids to come and practice without their devices or whatever. And she has mindfulness passes. So it's sort of like a hall pass that students can use if they need, if they need to come from study hall or from some classes. I'm not sure exactly what all the rules and ins and outs are of how that works, but I did think that was a pretty cool idea. So libraries are grabbing a hold of this. It's kind of new. It's a little different from how we have operated in the past. But libraries are not afraid of new and different. That is for sure. So, um, so somebody already had a question about establishing your own mindful. That's the next section of what I wanted to talk to. to speak to. So I have some tips for you on how to get started. Um, there's so many different ways to practice, really, truly, and you just explore, experiment. I'm going to share some resources at the end of the presentation before we leave today. But there are so many great resources out there that guide you through different kinds of practices. There are practices that are specific for building empathy. There are specific breathing practices that help to aid relaxation. So relaxation and mindfulness aren't exactly the same thing, but it's typically easier to practice mindfulness if you can feel relaxed in your body. So they are related. Um, there are there are movement practices. There's all kinds of different things. There are mindful eating as a practice. So just check out some different books, some different recordings, some actual teachers in your area. Look for classes. A lot of places will have even like free introductions to meditation and mindfulness and things like that. So you can kind of get a chance to feel what your brain and what your body are going to respond to. And you don't have to judge that. Whatever, your practice and somebody else's practice might look a little different. And that's okay. There's lots of different ways to practice mindfulness. And at the beginning, establish a realistic commitment. So, you don't have to suddenly be going for week long to experience the benefits of mindfulness. But also, like I said before, it's not an intellectual exercise. So we can't just wait for the person to cut us off and then say, oh, wait, I remember mindfulness. I should choose to respond differently in this moment. It doesn't work like that. We have to practice. We have to practice. So you can think of it sort of like going to the gym a little bit. If you, let's say, I can't lift a 50-pound bag of dog food. It's difficult. Let's say that's my situation. Maybe I go and I work out and I'm slowly working on lifting 5-pound weights and 10-pound weights and 20-pound weights. And then, before I know it, I can lift that 50-pound bag of dog food and it's no problem at all. It's the same with practicing mindfulness. The more that we practice, the better that we get at it. And the more that we practice, the more that our brain actually changes, which is what allows for that space for us to have a little bit more room, a little bit more opportunity to choose how we want to respond to a stimulus rather than just being on autopilot and reacting with whatever our default way of reacting is. So maybe right now you can start off with 5 minutes, 3 days a week. Maybe that's where you are. Maybe you can do 15 minutes a day. Maybe you can do, 5 minutes every day and a couple of days a week, 15 minutes or a half hour or something like that. I'm not going to tell you like how much you have to practice. I'm going to tell you to start to build a practice. Start to build the practice that's going to work for you. Because as you do this and as you experience it in your own life, you will find that it feels less burdensome to make the time to practice. You'll find yourself just carving it out or really making sure that you don't miss it because of what you are experiencing for yourself. And that is a huge part of what I love about mindfulness. It's not dogmatic. It's not telling you have to do this exact thing, this exact way, because I'm the authority and that's what I'm going to tell you to do. It says, try it out. Try it out and see what happens. And that's really the invitation that I would like to extend to all of you too. Try it out and see what happens. At the end of the day, it's all about just taking a minute to breathe. So we have enough time. Good. I want to do one more practice together. This is body scan practice. So once again, we're going to find a way that we can sit comfortably. And for this practice, if you're in a space where you have the opportunity to lie down. If any of you are at home or have an office where you're able to lie down, you might want to consider doing that if you don't think that you'll fall asleep. We're only going to practice for 4 or 5 minutes, so you probably wouldn't fall asleep. If you're really tired, maybe you just want to sit. Um, so this practice is called a body scan. And when you find, however, you're going to sit or lie down, just allow your eyes to softly close if that feels good. If you prefer to keep the eyes open, that's fine. You can just allow the gaze to be soft. And we're going to allow the awareness to move through the body and just feel what we feel and where we feel it. Just notice what's here. So begin by allowing your awareness to come to your feet. No need to make anything happen. You may feel a lot of sensation. You may feel no sensation at all. That's fine. Just invite your awareness to rest with the physical feeling inside and outside of your feet. And then we'll bring the awareness up into the legs. So noticing the physical sensations in the shins and the calves. Mind may already be wandering. That's fine. Gently guide it back. What do you feel in your lower leg? Notice now what you feel in your knees. Invite the awareness up into the thighs, the hips, the feet. Just noticing what you feel, where you feel it. Trying not to label what you discover, pleasant, unpleasant, good, bad, right, wrong. Just being curious. What's here in my body today, right now. Allow the awareness to expand up the body, up the torso, up the spine, feeling the low back, mid back, upper back, the entire length of the spine. Notice any feelings that you feel of frustration, discomfort, self-consciousness, pleasantness, relaxation, whatever. Let it go. Back to the physical sensations in the torso and back and spine. Notice now the fingers, the hands, arms and shoulders. Notice what you feel in the neck and the throat. Bring your awareness to the face. Notice the sensations, the forehead, space between the eyes, cheek, jaw. Because we tend to hold so much tension here, just invite into your body the opportunity to relax in these areas if it's willing. 10% more. And for a few final breaths, just feel the entirety of the whole body, inside, outside. ready, you can blink open the eyes. I'd like to close our time together by sharing a few resources with you if you're interested in learning more about mindfulness for your personal practice or for collection development or for programming, whatever. Um, so, a great book to be aware of is The Mindful Librarian. And this book was it was co-written by Richard Moniz and a number of other folks. And Richard Moniz he is the director of the library school at UNC Chapel Hill. And he is doing a lot of work in this space, particularly from an academic perspective. So the book, The Mindful Librarian, really does a great job at connecting the practices of mindfulness and the theories of librarianship. He's working on another one that ALA will be publishing later this year that is um, more practical kind of suggestions for folks. So it's called Recipes for Mindfulness. And so people who are using mindfulness in different kinds of libraries are sharing their experience and how they got it started and what's working. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be really cool. Wherever You Go, There You Are by Jon Kabat-Zinn is a classic for sure. And Real Happiness at Work is a book by Sharon Salzberg, who is a very, very well-known meditation teacher. And it specifically connects mindfulness practice to work life and work satisfaction. There's also a Mindfulness in Libraries Facebook group that you can join. So that is a pretty cool place where people who are interested in mindfulness in libraries are sharing what they're doing, asking questions, sharing resources, etc. And then a free resource that I really love is this app called Insight Timer. And they have a ton of guided meditations. It's kind of hard to start the practice at first, just sitting in open space. So sometimes having someone guide you through some practices can really help you establish your practice. And they have practices ranging from 1 minute all the way up to several hours. And it's just a really great resource. Lots of different bell sounds and things like that too. So these are some things that I would recommend checking out if you're interested in learning more. And then there are some other ways to connect with me that I'm just going to leave with you. I'm doing another another webinar with Info People on yoga story time in just a couple weeks. That's coming up pretty soon. I do certification and training for folks who want to learn how to use yoga in their storytime programs. That's called Story Songs and Stretches. I'll be presenting on movement in libraries at ALA Annual and at the Ausk Institute with some fantastic colleagues. And I have an online 4-week class coming up this fall on mindfulness work as well. So I'm going to take a second to look back through some of the questions here and make sure that we got things addressed. Somebody asked, okay, yeah. Okay, so I see that somebody asked about apps. So yeah, I love Insight Timer. That is my favorite one. I know a lot of other people use an app called Headspace, but I believe that it has a cost. So I am not familiar with that one, but I have heard people say that they really like it. So those would be a couple that I would recommend. Somebody asked, how do you locate someone to lead a staff program on mindfulness? Is there an association of registered or trained people? I don't want to hire someone who is incompetent or sort of self-trained. That's an interesting question. So they're really okay. So there is a certification called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. Okay, so this is a training that folks can go through based on Jon Kabat-Zinn's work. It's his program, and it's in Massachusetts. As far as I know, the only place that it is taught. and it is grueling. And it's very, very rigorous training. And there are a lot of qualifications in terms of degrees and work experience that you have to even be considered to be able to do part of that program, because it's so focused on like medical stuff and therapy and things like that. So that's the only certification in mindfulness training that I am aware of, and the bar is very, very, very high. I'm very lucky because my main mentor in the town where I live as a yoga teacher is actually a psychotherapist with 30 years of experience as a yoga teacher who has been trained in that program. She's an MBSR certified instructor, so I get to learn and practice with her, which is fantastic. But beyond that, a lot of this is sort of self-trained. People work together and in different kinds of groups, and certainly in yoga trainings and things like that, there's some formal, depending on the program, there may be some formal instruction on mindfulness, and then those folks learn how to work with adult learners as well. I would really say talk with people. Just reach out to different groups and have a conversation with somebody about what their experience is, about how they teach, if they have any references. If somebody is a mindfulness teacher and they have experience working with adult learners and they have references, but they don't have a specific credential, it doesn't necessarily mean to rule them out. So I would say just to kind of trust your gut and talk to people and see what they have to offer on that. So I hope that is a helpful recommendation. Let's see. What else is in here? Tips on incorporating mindfulness into customer service. Well, making time for your staff to practice mindfulness, incorporating mindfulness into how you operate with each other and how you treat each other. That would be really where I would start. And if you're thinking more for yourself personally, there's this concept in mindfulness of beginner's mind, and that is approaching everything like it's the first time. So challenging yourself to be able to approach customer service with that attitude of beginner's mind. And like that example that I gave at the beginning, you may be hearing a question for the 20th time today, but it's that person's first time asking it. And being able to take their perspective and have some empathy for their situation really allows us to provide much more responsive and compassionate customer service. And as we practice mindfulness over time, the research is showing that we can actually increase our empathy. But we don't get there just by thinking ourselves there. We have to actually practice. So making the time to do that. Folks are asking some questions about some things that I am doing. You can find out more information about all of that stuff at my website, which is connectedcommunitiesconsulting.com. And you can also email me if you have specific questions at katie@connectedcommunitiesconsulting.com too. That's no problem. I'm happy to respond. Somebody else recommends Stop, Breathe, and Think app, and they say that it's free. Thank you so much for that tip. That's great. Does breathing help distracted people concentrate? Without knowing your specific situation, friend, I'm just going to give a blanket answer of yes. We are able to improve our focus and our awareness, because what we're doing is we're training our brain to, every time that we have a thought, we just acknowledge it with this friendly curiosity and come back to the breath. Just acknowledge it, thinking, come back to the breath. So over time, that space between being able to watch our breath and noticing, there I am thinking again, will start to grow. but I am not in any way advocating mindfulness as a replacement for any kind of mental health services or anything of that nature. So please don't take what I say to be like an answer to your specific situation. Okay. What is the name of the app? Again, the one I was recommending is called Insight Timer. And then somebody else shared Stop, Breathe, and Think. Somebody else has shared that there's a group called Palouse Mindfulness that offers a free 8-week MBSR class. Yeah, so the 8-week MBSR class, that is a great class. That is what people who are certified in MBSR then go on to teach. That's the John Kabat-Zinn class that teaches you how to develop your own mindfulness practice. And yeah, there are a lot of different people who do that in different places. It's great. Yeah, somebody else suggested if your healthcare association has MBSR classes, maybe they would come do training at your library. Great partnership to look into. That's a really good idea. Okay, and I think that is everything for questions. Like I said, you can reach out to me, Katie at Connected Communities Consulting, with more individual questions. And please feel free to connect with me via my website or social media to just have have more connection with what it is that I'm doing on a regular basis. So with that, thank you all so much. I'll turn it back over to Mary.